Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and welcome to my astrology channel. I take a look at the week ahead and see what configurations are happening, what there is to talk about, and then look at world events and also our own individual lives. So we get a kind of heads up on what's going on. Now, one of the things that astrologers like myself do, because we write forecasts for websites, magazines, whatever we may do, we have to work a really, really long time in advance. So often in my head, I'm working 6 months ahead. So when I come to doing my video today, and I'm talking about the next 7 days, it's often a little bit of a surprise when I get to see what's coming up. And in a way, that's good because it's refreshing and it gets me very engaged in what's going on. Now, next week, we have some shifts and moves. And by that, I mean, we've got 2 planets changing signs. And at the very end of the week, we have a full moon in Leo. And these are the main areas that I want to talk about today. Now, let's start off with Mercury in Pisces. Mercury has been in Aquarius for the past few weeks, and now it's entering the sign of Pisces. And that's not just important for Pisces, it's also important for Virgos, Geminis, and Sagittarians, because these signs, all mutable signs, when we look at the horoscope, then Mercury is entering important areas of the solar chart for you signs. And Mercury brings its principles of communication and travel, the exchange of ideas, and also just simply the word movement. Situations move. You move around more. Your mind is darting around more, and all things that come under Mercury, even things like commerce and sales, even money, then Mercury has dominion over these things of life, and these things tend to start to take precedence, especially for those 4 signs I've mentioned. Now, Aries, for instance, the next sign of the zodiac, Venus is entering your sign. But guess what? Mercury is entering your preceding sign, in other words, the 12th house. And that means you're in for a period of introspection. The 12th house of the horoscope is an area where things are ending and being distilled and maybe sort of closed down in preparation for a new start. So we don't always spark on all 4 cylinders when we've got planets in the 12th house. We should spend more time sleeping. And certainly we need to recognize and acknowledge the importance of the unconscious mind, because it's our peripheral vision, as it were, that's soaking up a lot of information that the conscious mind isn't doing. And that information is being delivered to us in the forms of dreams and intuition. So very important for Aries, having your Mercury in the 12th house from now and for quite a few more weeks. Now, in general, this is a good time, whatever your sign, to get dates in diaries and to snip loose ends, and generally check if everybody who matters, whether it's an event you're planning, whether it's things you're looking ahead to in the diary, or whether it's just simply mixing with people or working with them. We want to check that everybody is on the same page. The reason being that on February the 17th, Mercury is going to turn retrograde. And as you know, when Mercury turns a retrograde, information goes AWOL. And also people too. We can't get hold of people. So all the more reason to take this opportunity this week, whatever the sign of your zodiac, to start getting things sorted in terms of arrangements, and also just making sure all letters and messages and bills and all those things have been paid. And then when Mercury does turn retrograde, it can be very useful to us in terms of allowing us to review and reflect, and also maybe to make nostalgic journeys and to reconnect with people we haven't seen for a long time, or be in touch with things we haven't done for a long time. A retrograde Mercury is a very useful thing, and the more time we have for it, instead of being tripped up by people who haven't got our messages, the better. Now, Venus's move into Aries is going to be important also for Librans, Capricorns, and also for Cancerians, because these are the 4 cardinal points, as it were. And the minute we get something like, a Venus moving into a new sign, it becomes prominent for these other signs too. So Venus is bringing her principles of love, of harmony, of union, and also of, I don't want to use the word good fortune because it sounds a bit too much like end of the pier astrology. But I would say that when Venus is in our sign, or when it's in a prominent position in our chart, things seem to go a lot better. We seem to attract towards us good things. And of course, we all need love in our lives. And if you're one of those 4 signs, it's a good time, if you're single, to start dating or looking, checking out what's out there. And also if a relationship has lost its luster, getting it back one way or another. The principle of love being so important in all our lives. Of course, the other thing that Venus does, she's not all sweetness and light. And I come back to that idea of balance. If things are out of balance, it's Venus's job to get them back in balance. So she rolls up her sleeves and takes arms against things that really aren't functioning properly. And that may mean that there's an intense bout of discussion and perhaps difficulties that have to be faced so that the relationship can move forward in much better shape. But in some cases, it means that a relationship has really done its time. And that's Venus's job to show you that, even though her main principle is to bring love. And I suppose you could say that if a relationship ends because it isn't the right thing, then the way is prepared or is opened up for a new one. Now, the other important factor about Venus's transit of Aries is that it will angle Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto. And that will take place during the course of February and very early March. This is important because last November, early to mid-December, Venus went over, conjoined these same planets. So there is a link between these 2 time periods. Now, it may be just that things that happened then come back to be reviewed, or maybe a project started and maybe it's been moving along and suddenly now it comes to crunch point, or maybe it's the time to review it and see what needs to be addressed in order for it to continue. But this 3-month period, or nearly 3-month period, is very critical for relationships. Now, next week, I'm going to be doing a whole video on relationships. I'm going to call it the love issue. So we're going to be looking at, why certain signs attract other signs and why there's often conflict with certain signs. We're going to be looking at the whole gamut of relationships through astrology. But to come back to now, if a relationship began in that November, early to mid-December time, it's coming up to a point, a critical point. 90 days, 3 months, the relationship is moving out of the haze that it began in, and the 2 people involved are becoming real people. So you get to see whether the relationship is made of the right stuff, or whether, sadly, it's just not got legs. Now, technically, I suppose you could say that's more apparent towards the end of March, or maybe even early April, if you do 90 days from the day you met your, new person. But in point of fact, what changes this is not only the position of Venus, but also the full moon coming up, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, and also Valentine's Day. If you don't care 2 hoots about Valentine's Day, this is not for you right now. But a lot of people really find this a great test of a relationship, a great test of whether somebody really loves you or not. So just before that time is a sort of very sensitive time. And throw a full moon into that as well, it becomes a time when there's an acute sense of whether this relationship is really going to be the right thing or whether it isn't. And I'll come on to that again in a minute. First of all, let me talk about this full moon. It's in the sign of Leo. It's actually 20 degrees of Leo, and that will become important shortly. It's going to happen at 7:34 in the morning UT time. That's GMT, old money. But if you're living on the west coast of America, for instance, it's going to happen at 11:34 the previous night. Now, this moon is also known as the snow moon for pretty obvious reasons, because in the northern hemisphere, This is often the darkest, chilliest part of the winter season. And when you think about, well, particularly Scandinavia or Siberia or northern Canada, the snow moon is very fitting. But also, you're going to be hearing people saying it's a supermoon. Well, it's not really a supermoon. To fulfill the title of supermoon, we're going to have to wait till the next one on the 9th of March and also the 8th of April, just before Easter. This one is quite close to the Earth, so it will look quite large as you look at it. But technically, it's not a supermoon, okay? So I talked about the idea that 20 degrees of Leo is significant. So if you have a birthday around the 11th and 12th of July, or if you're an Aquarian and you've got your birthday on the 8th or 9th of February, this full moon is really looming large in your life, in your horoscope. And full moons are all about endings and beginnings. They're about closure and completion. Simmering situations come to the bubble. We get to sign contracts. We get to close deals. We do things that say, this is as far as we got, and that's it, that's done. And of course, you can have a stage of a relationship completed so that you've stopped dating and now you're ready to become a full-blown couple, or maybe you've been engaged and now you're ready to marry, or you're ready to move in with each other. So that idea of an ending for Leo and Aquarius in particular is very tied up with relationships and that theme of closure and completion. But this full moon at 20 degrees of Leo is also close to two fixed stars. One of them, Algenubi, and the other, Tania Borealis. Now, they're in the constellation Leo, and they're at the head of the Leo line, so to speak. And they have astrological principles attached to them. And both of them loosely have the principles of Mars and Saturn. This isn't a comfortable couple, Mars and Saturn. There's a really rather tough and uncompromising edge to this fixed star, and therefore that colors the full moon as well. And there's another factor here as well with Tania Borealis. This fixed star is meant to have some kind of affinity with monarchy and nation. So it is going to be a fairly significant full moon in the lives of monarchies and also of particular nations. And of course, we have already seen things like that being extremely important. But what I thought I would do is just take a look at our particular monarchy. Let's have a look at Queen Elizabeth's chart, because you'll see that this is really important, this full moon for her, and also for Prince Andrew. And it's the Prince Andrew situation that is reaching a critical point. And I'll show you why. Let me get the charts out so that we can have a look at them. And here we go. You know how I hate technology. So here we have Prince Andrew's chart, but in fact, what I really want to start with the Queen, so I'm going to bring her up first. And what we can see here is that the Queen does in fact have her moon in Leo. And I think this is part of the Queen we don't see a lot. She has an enormous sense of humor and a great sense of drama and color, used to love to act and perform. And of course, I suppose you could say that a large part of being a monarch is being able to perform in public. So we do see this moon in Leo. But what is important here is that the full moon is going to fall on the planet Neptune here. And even more important, the sun at 20 of Aquarius is going to be on Queen Elizabeth's Mars. So this full moon is going to be right in her royal kitchen. There's going to be a lot going on. And you may remember that it was suggested last week that she was about to have a very important meeting with Prince Charles. And it is pretty important to remember that, you know, a lot of people have stepped down from the monarchy recently. We've lost Harry, we've lost Meghan, and of course we lost Prince Andrew before that because of his connection with the disgraced and late Jeffrey Epstein. But unfortunately, Prince Andrew's problem hasn't gone away. Technically, because he stepped down from royal duties, the monarchy has nothing to do with his situation, so they won't speak for him. But when we think about the Queen and her moon in Leo, she is, after all, a mother This is her family, the moon, so this is of great concern to her. So now let's take a little look at Prince Andrew's chart. And we see here, he has got Leo rising. In fact, his degree of the ascendant, 1133, is his mother's moon, is Queen Elizabeth's moon. And you know, it is said that he is her favorite son. And that connection between the moon and Leo is really rather beautiful and showing that connection right now. But what we're looking at here in terms of this full moon to come up is this 18 degrees of Leo. That's where Prince Andrew's Uranus is. And so that's going to trigger that Uranus, which is going to mean there are going to be some very unexpected and uncertain conditions about to enter his life. Now, of course, Uranus is also the great awakener. And it would be nice to think that what's going on right now is a great awakening for him. And certainly it has seemed to be very difficult for him to take responsibility for what appears or allegedly happened all those many years ago. So we might be seeing this awareness of the responsibility that he has to take. But at the same time, I think it is also a little bit shocking. And I think it very unlikely that he will get away with no longer speaking to the FBI about any knowledge he may have of his time with the disgraced and late Jeffrey Epstein. So let me come back here. Now, okay, I'm getting to the end of what I want to talk about. The full moon matters to us all. We get 13 full moons a year, and each one of those full moons will fall in different areas of our horoscope. So sometimes it's going to connect with something majorly important, and at other times it's going to be fairly insignificant. I happen to think this full moon is pretty significant for all of us, because I think coming on the heels of a January that had the Saturn-Pluto conjunction and a lot of things that bubbled up at that time, both internationally and also in our own lives, it's almost as though this first full moon after the lunar eclipse is, well, I use the idea of closure and completion, but it really is a time of tying things up and settlements and all those kind of things. And that is for absolutely all of us. Now, what I also want to say, and I'm wrapping this up right now, is that one of the reasons that I do these videos and why I like to show you what's happening in the astrology, what I like to do is to look at current events and the things that are important on the world stage, and so that we can give perspective and definition and meaning through the astrology about those events. But it's also important that we prepare for them as well, so that looking ahead in the week, we're also prepared for the various things that I've talked about on this video. And when you think about a full moon coming up, and actually on the Friday, the moon will first of all oppose Saturn, then on the Saturday it will angle Uranus, and then it will become full. That whole period is potentially delicate and sensitive. And if we know that, we're not going to go barging into situations all guns blazing. We're going to pussyfoot around. We're going to know that we don't necessarily have to burn a bridge. And when we're in a position of knowledge about what's around astrologically, we're much better able to handle a situation and turn it into a way that we can really manage it. One of the things that I really feel is hugely important with this idea of knowing about things as we come towards them and being in a calm state where we can acquire distance and perspective is that we see more options. We can change our view. We can change our outlook. And when we change our outlook and we change our view, change our position, we change outcomes. And I want to leave you with that thought this week because that's very empowering. Have a good week. Enjoy that beautiful full moon. And I'll see you same place, same time next week. Bye for now.